do I trust myself? I started to talk about the growth of the business. Being entrepreneurial means juggling lots of different things and taking risks. Money mindset can be a part of it.
This is the Education Business Podcast for all founders and business owners in the education sector. This podcast is for you if you have an education business or you're thinking about starting one. That could be tutoring, publishing, holiday clubs. It really doesn't matter. You're in business and you're also in education. But most of all, you're focused on improving outcomes for children in the way you know best, through your business. I'm Claire Riley, co-founder of educational resources website Classroom Secrets, and I'll be sharing how to make your education business bigger, better, and have more impact through my own experiences and also the conversations I have with other founders and business owners in education. The Education Business Podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets, helping you to support your children's learning. Richard, welcome to the Education Business Podcast. Tell us how you transitioned from being in the classroom to having an education business. What did that look like for you? What decisions did you have to make? What drove you to make that decision in the first place? And where are you now?
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast, and also appreciate the innovative way of recording this. It's really making it accessible. I love the open question as well. Taking on the idea of just taking you through the story right from the start, and that first few months while I was teaching full time and I was trying to make more of the tuition. Like your question about what decisions were made, I think at the beginning, like I wasn't really making any what I would consider now like business decisions in a sense. There was an element of more feelings like, do I trust myself? Like, why am I feeling so scared? What am I really scared of? And there was some sort of deep searching going along around like, can I really make a go of this? Is this something that can actually sustain and maintain life as a parent, as the main breadwinner, those kind of things. And so I would say the decision making around from a business sense, I don't think I was really making them. It was more about can I really find enough clients? Can I really charge enough to make it all worthwhile? And I actually didn't really take that trust with me when I left. So I will cycle back and talk about this a little bit, but when I was leaving, I didn't technically leave and just do tuition because that wasn't viable. I wasn't earning enough money. It was earning okay money, but it still needed something to supplement. And I was really fortunate. I had a conversation with like a friend of a friend, probably around Easter time before I left. I left in the summer. So at Easter time, I had this conversation with somebody who was running an EdTech company and they wanted some support with some digital marketing, a little bit of admin work during the week, going to some events, exhibiting, that kind of thing. And I knew a little bit about digital marketing. I knew a little bit about exhibiting, nothing that I was particularly experienced at. But what that job provided me was the stability that I needed so that I could grow the business. And so I kind of went in, I would say, with half measure, because I still had something quite comfortable. It wasn't really great money, but that with the tuition was perfectly fine. I wasn't making what I was making as a kind of, I suppose, quite a well-paid teacher. I'd been teaching for about 10 years at that point. So yeah, I think a lot of nerves at the beginning with that transition away from the classroom, and probably not a lot of faith in myself either. My actual story of leaving school, I've shared quite a few times, but I'll give it to you in a nutshell. I was in a school for a really long time with a lot of sideways movement. I'm quite an ambitious and driven person, but there wasn't a lot of opportunity to grow in that school. And it was an amazing place, which is why everybody stayed. And in a industry, to find a place where you were well supported, I was really happy. People were reluctant to leave. Quite rightly so, because I decided to, and within sort of 3 months, I'd left the new school. I'd got a job as an assistant head. It wasn't a good fit for anybody. I left. I had about 2 months, maybe 3 months just at home while I was searching for another job. I managed to get into a great school that built up my confidence again, but I'd already made the decision to leave teaching behind. And that is what then prompted to have conversations kind of outside of the classroom with different opportunities. But I do appreciate that my journey there is quite unique in that as soon as I looked for something different, an opportunity appeared and I grabbed it. So that's my story of transition away. There's loads more to it, but I would say those big decisions I needed to make, I didn't make straight away. Like they happened almost organically as the business grew. I had to start making decisions. One of the biggest decisions I made early on was investing in myself. It was about looking at it from a business perspective and saying, what do I need to do? How am I going to get from where I am now to where I really want to be in, say, 3 months' time or 6 months' time? And I took a really short-term view of the business back then because that is what was needed. So just to continue then, like from where I was as I left school and started growing my tuition business, I was pretty much working most evenings, but I was in my car driving around to people's houses. Knowing that I needed to change that model because that wasn't going to give me the growth that I needed. I was going to spend most of my time in my car, and I was spending all day Sunday tutoring. And I was driving so many miles. It was it was a wide span that I was covering, sort of doing sort of anywhere between kind of probably upwards of about 60 miles on a Sunday, traveling around from place to place. And so I put a plan in place. Like I'm lucky in that my interest has always been business. I did a business degree and all my reading around when I had time as a full-time teacher was in business books or self-help books. So I always felt like I was always sharpening the tool of business without really sort of heading into it in a full way, which I always had ambitions to do, but I never really knew what it was going to look like. It's a bit like I used to sit in the staff room and say, there must be a better way of earning like 35 grand a year. This is some of the stuff we're being asked to do here is ridiculous for the amount we're getting paid. And don't get me wrong, look, I absolutely love teaching. I'm passionate about being with the children and the learning, but being in the classroom, full-time teacher now, I just felt there was another way of living your life. And I read a book called the 4 hour, I think it's is it the 4 hour week or the 4 hour work day by Tim Ferriss. And I've probably read that in my early 30s. I'm 43 now. I started my business, I'd say properly when I was 36. And it was talking about like basically being a digital nomad. And something about that grabbed me. Like I've got 5 children, and so being a digital nomad was never going to be on my path. I wasn't going to be able to get up and leave, but there was still something about having that flexibility with life, and it was doable for all of us. Like there's just something about that that really grabbed me, and so I mean I didn't do anything about it straight away. But it was always there, and I've read other books since, and there's been other things I've learned along the way, I suppose, just by running a business. But there's still that pivotal moment where I was like, "There's another way of living," and that's something which I've just carried around with me. So when I was like going around and to people's houses, I knew there was another way of running the business, and I needed to find support, and that's what I did. I took courses, I was going to conferences when we was allowed. I was my business had been going for about 6 or 7 months when COVID hit. And to be honest with you, it's a bit of a godsend because I was still able to work for the EdTech company and my tuition went online. I didn't lose anybody. In fact, I gained quite a few students, probably like most tutors. I got to know the online world really well during that time. And again, quite lucky in that because I was working remotely anyway for quite a few months. We were doing lots of meetings online, whether it's on Teams, on Zoom. So I had some knowledge to use. Anyway, it kind of worked out really well because the business continued to grow and we wasn't spending any money over COVID because Zoom was costing me £10 a month. That was pretty much all I was investing in the business. And it was just bringing in money. And similar with the EdTech company, we were saving money. I was getting paid. There was no expenses going out. And so it gave me almost like a little bit of a nest egg to start investing in the business. And that's what I did. So I did find the courses and a mentor, and that really helped me sort of take the business to the next level. And I started treating it like a proper business. And so where I'm at now, I've got my own premises. I prefer face-to-face and online. I still do a little bit of online, and we've dabbled a little bit with hybrid tuition this year. So we have some in the room, some online. That's gone really well. But I have my own premises. People come to me. We run groups from Monday to Friday, and I still offer a small amount of one-to-one for children who are SEM. But I'm really proud of the business and what it's become, and where it's going next. We have a few tutors working for within the company now, and just have that trust that it's a solid business, which probably 3 or 4 years ago, I still had the elements of doubt. And so where we are now is on very solid ground. It's growing and it's expanding into offering different things. And I'm just really excited about like what the future's going to hold. It was about 3 years ago that I started to talk about the growth of the business, and I'd met somebody at a conference who had or was running 3 businesses. I think it might have grown to 4 now. And I was like, look, I really want to talk to you about this because I'm struggling to run 1. How are you struggling? How are you working with 3? That seems crazy to me. And we spoke about how one business can be sort of the one you use to bootstrap the second. And if you're careful with your systems and procedures, you can grow a business to a certain point, leave elements of it behind for other people to take on so you can grow into the next one. And you can do this without losing too much profit or control, as long as you do the things like quality assurance and all of those things. Now, this has taken me quite a long time to get right in my business, for sure. I mean, some of those stuffs are quite tricky. But what I decided to do from that was actually, I think there's something here for teachers, and I want to support teachers in a way that I found support. And so early days, I just started turning up on Facebook. I created a group, and I just started talking about growing my business. I just started talking about and sharing about the things that I'm trying, doing live experiments, just making sure that people could see what I was trying and whether it was working or not, and just turning up, I suppose, in quite a vulnerable way and saying, look, this is what I'm going to do. Let's have a look at this together. This is what I'm going to do it. This is the theory behind it, but we're going to look at the reality together. And so I started building a community of teachers and tutors. Now, originally that was meant to be aimed at teachers, but it quickly shifted to tutors, people who've already decided to leave the classroom or have already left the classroom behind. And we've just created a community, which has turned into something called Tutors Who Thrive. And that's where I'm at now. We've got 2 businesses. We've got the tuition business, but we also have the business where we support other tutors to grow and or start and meet up and network and just see the tuition industry as this supportive place rather than this competitive arena where we all have to outdo each other. And that's gone really well. So between the 2 businesses that we've got, I'm really pleased with where we're at with both of them. I'm really excited about the next stage and next phase for both of these businesses.
I always love asking that question, tell me a story, because I find out things I don't know. Even if I've heard somebody's story properly before, there's always extra detail. So thank you for sharing that. I had no idea that you had done a business degree. So question on that one, had you always wanted to have your own business at some point, but went into teaching because you didn't know what you wanted to do in terms of business at that point? Or did it just fall out of moving schools and realizing you didn't like it?
Well, I would say that I always had a brain for business, even as a young kid, and was always looking at ways I could make money. I came from a family where we didn't have a lot of money, but we had a lot of other things. I look back on my childhood and teenage years and realized that how little money we had as a family. But my dad was a farm worker, he still is a farm worker, And what came with that was a nice house with quite a lot of land. And so we made the most of what we had, and we had a really nice kind of childhood. But I look back on just the money side of it, and we didn't have a lot. And so therefore we wasn't given a lot as a kid. And so we're given like the values of money to a point, but then also like, as you've probably experienced with other people you've interviewed, anybody who comes from that kind of background has to then undo a lot of money mindset blocks. And I'm no different. So what I would say is at a young age, yes, I used to think about business quite a lot. I was the kid who walked around the local towns and villages with a bucket and sponge, would go and offer to wash people's cars. I'd be knocking on doors of shops and saying, "Do you need anybody?" You know, from the age where I just shouldn't have even had a job. I had to lie about my age to get a job when I was 12. So there was always like this drive to do something around making money and having some for myself. Not particularly, I'd say, business like at that point. But what was weird, I think now, like looking back at being 15, 16, I did want to go into a profession where I was helping others. And I didn't know what that looked like at the time. But the career, I mean, about to turn 43. So going back that amount of years, the careers advice at school wasn't amazing. And I was told just to join the army. Like I was obsessed with football, and I still wanted to be a professional footballer at that point. I was a really good athlete, to a degree, like not a pro level, I might add, but I was a very active, sporty sort of person. And but the advice never really took me down a path where I was like, oh, this is really clear. This is what I really want to do. And they were like, yeah, just go and join the army because that will kind of meet this need and that need and this interest. And that was never ever going to be on the cards for me. That the army was not an option. And so when I turned up to college for the first time, I didn't really have an idea about what I wanted to do. Business was there just because it was a very broad topic. But I actually got swayed by the experience of leisure and tourism. And that's what I did for 2 years at college, which then it was amazing time. So many great opportunities, like traveling around Europe, all expenses paid, and just met some amazing people. It was a great time. But that led me down to do a business degree. And even at that point, no idea really, again, of what I was going to do. I was that kind of passion around like doing something for myself, but also with that support of others, which led me into community work. So I did my business degree, and it led me into working in the community. So I was about 21 at this point, and I decided then I wanted to be a teacher. At 21, I had 2 children, and we was about to have our third. So like life was quite tough in those early stages, like in terms of, and I mean from a monetary sense and time perspective, it was really hard work. And I really wanted to get experience working with children. This is a whole story in itself, by the way, like just how this happened, but I'll save that for another time. And so even my route into teaching was a bit around the houses, but I worked in community for about 10 years. So Sure Start, Home Start, worked in the youth service, did sort of a lot of sort of part-time jobs to make up part-time hours for about 6 years. Then I worked in social services for a few years, working in an early intervention team. And so when I kind of think back about that journey towards teaching in itself, there's a whole story around that I wasn't 100% sure teaching was the thing. I always knew it was something I wanted to have a go at. But then when I did decide, and it was kind of almost forced really from a difficult position in another job, like the job went because of the financial crisis back in sort of 2010, 2011, or 28. Well, I think it was 2008 actually, or 2009, and then the contract ran out and actually moved in 2010. That kind of happened again because of a bit of drive and ambition on my part, and then got into teaching, and I absolutely loved it. I don't want to like blow my own trumpet because that doesn't sound right, but a lot of it came naturally, like not the subjects, but the actual teaching part, the delivery, the connection with the class and the colleagues, that came quite naturally to me. And I felt at home instantly, and I was like, this is it for me. So the move towards teaching was kind of around the houses and a bit weird, but I loved I loved it. I loved it from the very first day I was sitting as a trainee to even in the school where it was really hard and there was a lot of friction. I just loved the teaching and I loved that class. I was only there for 3 months. The one which I left and kind of ultimately meant I was going to go and start my business. I loved them and I had such a good time. So yeah, teaching feels really comfortable. I mean, I don't, and in my business life now, I don't use anything from my business degree. I can barely remember anything from it. But we think about how just life has changed over the last 20 odd years since I've left. And yeah, the stuff we were taught then is just wouldn't even be spoken about now. And I kind of think, apart from like maybe the legal stuff and then maybe a little bit of the accounting, but even then I would say some of that stuff's changed apart from the fundamentals. But like the marketing part, so different. So I think when I started my business, it was back to square one and going, right, what do I know? What don't I know? What am I passionate about? What can I do quite naturally? What do I really need to work on? And that's when I started looking for support. So yeah, I think that's like in a nutshell, that journey towards owning my own business. As a young kid, definitely had the passion and drive and it was kind of like on a monetary end, like to have a little bit more, also like work ethic, drive when perhaps others didn't have it. I found it a way to sort of get ahead, which is still there today, but I don't think I hold the same monetary stuff anymore. Like because I suppose because I don't have to, businesses are doing okay. Yeah, they could always be better, but essentially like I kind of ticked that box. So yeah, I think that kind of sums it up in a nutshell.
It's interesting that you mentioned that about business studies. So I've got a friend who used to teach business studies and she asked me to come in as like a real entrepreneur. And the session that I delivered had nothing to do with the curriculum at all. So it was in marketing. I showed them the back end of our Facebook page and the ads that we'd run and different results on socials. And they'd never seen anything like that before. And it wasn't even in the curriculum. It didn't even talk about socials. It was all about print marketing. And I just remember thinking at the time, gosh, this is so outdated. What are they actually learning that's useful? This is not useful for an entrepreneur because it's giving you the wrong mindset. I just want to pick up on something else that you said as well. You mentioned that people with a teaching background usually have money mindset issues. And while you had business in you from a very young age, you were no different and you had to work through them as well. Where do you think this stems from? Where do money mindset issues for teachers come from?
Claire, you're not suggesting that curriculums aren't made with the future in mind, are you? I mean, look, I think that whatever subject that we went into that potentially had a vocation attached to it, I think that would be the case. And it's a shame, but it's just a reality. And I remember suggesting a few years ago about trying to get more aligned with business and corporations. And I think like quite rightly there were people saying, well, no, that's concerning because you want to put education at the hands of like corporates. But there is definitely a disconnect between the two without a doubt. And then how useful is that vocational qualification if it's not actually vocational? The skills we're teaching them aren't going to be used in the real world, which is a shame. So yeah, but it's great they get access to somebody like you who can actually show them that this is actually what it's like and this is what we're doing at the heart of business, and being entrepreneurial means juggling lots of different things and taking risks and monitoring and tracking and experimenting with whether it's socials or advertising or whatever, But the fact that they're still focused on print media is crazy. Right, bringing it back to the question about money mindset and teachers, I don't think this is just about teachers. I think that my view would be very narrow because I tend to talk to teachers who are leaving teaching towards tuition or those who have already left and are struggling in some way with growing a business. And money mindset can be a part of it. It's never usually the main reason, but there is certainly something around that. I don't believe it's anything that is like attached to teaching as such. I think it's more about like being a carer, somebody who's being brought up that way inclined that we look out for others, and that becomes like almost like a passion project, doesn't it? Like I don't think there's many people who go into teaching who aren't caring or have a caring nature about them. Like, we want to go into teaching because we want to make a difference somewhere. We want to see that difference. We don't necessarily go into teaching because of the money. I know there are some people who would choose it because it is something that fits around having a younger family, or on paper, that's what it feels like. You get holidays off, and it's usually aligned when your children are growing up, it aligns with their holidays, when you're around, they're around, that kind of thing. And we know the reality of that is slightly different to that anyway. But often we're not going into that profession to earn lots of money. It's because we have a passion for a subject. We want to share that with children and young people, or that we have a caring part about us that fits really well in early years or key stage 1. And then we use that in any way that we want, in any style of teaching that we develop within that profession. But you take that outside of the profession, it doesn't always translate into being a natural business person. What actually happens is we can still do all those caring things within our business, but when it comes to what we might consider those nitty-gritty parts, where we're talking about making ourselves up as a business, where we're talking about everything that we offer and how good we are, and then we're talking about the pricing of our services, and then talking about the money, like, those things feel uncomfortable because we haven't trodden that path down enough yet, or the way that we were brought up and our background comes into play. Like, do we think we're worthy of making the money? If we even manage to find success, even by accident, do we keep hold of the money, or do we race it back to zero? Or make poor decisions with money because it feels more comfortable than actually investing it in something that we know is going to grow bigger, into something bigger. So I think there's definitely more to it, and we could probably talk. Well, not me, because I'm not the expert, but I know there would be people who'd be able to talk for hours and hours just on money mindset. I mean, there's hours of courses you could get into to kind of help you unpick what's keeping you blocked. I mean, one of the things I talk about a lot is the money myths that we grow up with. And there was one that stuck with me throughout all of my life, really. It was something which my mum used to say, money is the root to all evil. So therefore, if I became rich, would that make me evil? Would that make me do bad things? And unpicking what that really means, and what is actually possible if you have money, and looking at it in a real positive sense, helps me understand that it's okay, and I can be accepted, and I can talk confidently and clearly about money and pricing and so on, and have these, what I would have considered, say, 4 or 5 years ago, quite awkward conversations. Now they feel quite comfortable. That's not me saying that I'm always comfortable talking about it, because I'm not. And there's times when I feel really on top of my money mindset, and there's times when I'm not. And I suppose when I'm talking to other tutors about this, it's like you need to unpick what's there for you. And sometimes this sits quite deep on an unconscious level, and we don't bring it out to the surface to deal with. But we might need to. I often say to people that, think about someone in your life who doesn't seem to have those money worries. They just seem to get by or do really well, and it doesn't even seem to bother them that life can have its natural ups and downs, and money can be scarce sometimes it can be abundant. They just seem to get on with it. They seem to keep coming up smelling of roses, whereas perhaps for you or us, we worry about those things more. The thing is, when we are in that state, we often don't see the opportunities that are around us. And this is where I think working on your money mindset makes a big difference to our business. If we're focused on the abundance part of life, where we believe there's enough out there for everybody, we start to see the opportunities. Whereas if we're on the negative side, we miss them, or we're not opening up ourselves to the possibility of that growth and accepting that the success can come our way. I mean, this is still not a surefire way to success, but we want to reduce the friction towards success. And this is part of that. And that you know, and I know that growing a business has challenges along the way that far outreach your own money mindset, or what you're bringing with you as baggage, whether that's money mindset or imposter syndrome, or just a lack of self-belief. There will be the actual logistical challenges. So what we want to try and do is focus on the things we can control, which are things like the logistical challenges, and deal less with the emotional side of what we bring, but by dealing with it up front. So money mindset, I think, is about, well, lots of us have been brought up as carers, or it becomes quite natural. We maybe feel outside of our comfort zone when we start, or forcing ourselves to grow this business to replace a teacher's salary or beyond, and then having to deal with uncomfortable conversations like, this is how much I charge. This is how, you don't have to say how much you earn, but this is how much I'd want to earn, as a dream target. So yeah, I think it's very complex. It's worth everybody looking into. I advise people to go down the abundance versus scarcity mindset path, because that will be super enlightening as a starting point. And then if you needed extra support from there, go and find it. It will be worth it in the long run.
Maybe then it's more linked to if you've just come out of a job. I suppose that can be quite hard to transition, because it's a completely different way of creating money, of accepting money into your life than being an entrepreneur, especially if you have been in the public sector, because like in teaching, you generally have like the first 6 years, you're going to move through the scale without much problem. It's going to be quite easy. Your salary is going to increase by 10 grand, that kind of thing. There's a lot of safety in that, isn't there? And in entrepreneurship, there's quite a lot of risk. You mentioned something that I resonated with, which was, we both know that there are always problems in business that are bigger than your money mindset. And we have had many where we felt like the business is imploding. Have you ever had any situations where you felt like the business is imploding? And how have you dealt with that? How have you got through it?
Imploding is probably too strong for what I'm about to say. I've never really had moments where I've gone, oh my gosh, this is going all wrong. There are times when I've made mistakes, or the communication's not been as strong as I wanted it to be, or there's been breakdown of relationships with like parents. I mean, it doesn't happen often, but when it happens, it hits hard. So it's one of those, again, another mindset thing, and great feedback for you personally when you're running a business, that you're not always going to get things right. You're going to let things slip sometimes. We're all human. So I'd say they're probably the biggest ones. I'll tell you what happened this year. I had a really slow start in the tuition business in September, and I have a reset. So I mainly do Ken Test. The Ken Test happens very early on in September. And so my clients all leave at the same time, and I onboard new ones. Now, usually I have a really strong start because people are like word of mouth and people are looking for that support. But this year was really slow. And when I reflected back, it was because I hadn't put the same amount of work in as I had the previous year and the year before. I'm running 2 businesses now, and there are different elements to those businesses. So when you start looking at the services, suddenly like I'm really spreading myself thin. And that's when it feels like it's going to implode, because you're juggling a lot and you're trying to do everything. I wouldn't say everything on my own. That would be unfair to the support team that I have around me. But there's times when everybody's spreading themselves thin, and I think sometimes really important jobs get put to the side, chasing something else, and or I don't know, maybe the chasing that dream moment where I'm either launching a course or a workshop, or we're doing a live event somewhere for Tutors Who Thrive. The Tutors Who Thrive stuff over the last sort of 12 months has really taken off. From a time perspective and brand perspective, it's gone really, really strong. But those things haven't always naturally led to the monetary side being strong. And that balance between a tuition business that does relatively well and Tutors Who Thrive that also does relatively well financially, means like there's this decision to be made. Like, where do you put your energy? What's the best space to or where's the best business to grow? Or what do you feel most passionate about? What's the big draw? So that was a really challenging start. And it was the first time where I've gone, oh, I really need to lean on a team here. I think I've heard you talk about this before, actually, Claire, where like we can get in our own way, and growing a team becomes absolutely essential if you want to continue doing what you currently do. So, for example, my tuition business needs tutors now. Tutors Who Thrive needs a support team. If I wasn't going to build a team in the tuition or have a support team around Tutors Who Thrive, I'd probably be doing both of them very poorly. I wouldn't be able to sort of drive both businesses either to maintenance or growth. I mean, I think both has potential to grow, so that's where my energy is going, but I could not do that on my own. So when I was looking at September and I had one tutor on board at this point, I looked at the timetable and went, I actually need a few more here. If I'm going to put some energy into the Tutors Who Thrive business, I'm going to need some support through the week so the tuition business doesn't actually implode and wind down to nothing, because that was a consideration that I was to go all into Tutors Who Thrive. But to be honest, I don't really want to do that. I really believe that the tuition has a really good potential creating a solid revenue stream for the business and for the people who work in it, as does Tutors Who Thrive. And so I wanted to create an environment where that was possible. So my way forward for that, which sounds crazy, doesn't it? I think, or might sound crazy to some people, was to throw more money that I didn't have and employing a VA, getting some other people on board, like Vicky, for example, who's been on board for Tutors Who Thrive for a little while now, probably about 6 or 7 months, and just making sure that we can like delegate tasks between us to keep everything on track. I've got 3 tutors on board for my face-to-face tuition, and everything's growing steadily. And that's been the way forward. There are things I'm missing out, like being really clear with your time management, having good boundaries. And I want to say I'm amazing at those things, but I'm not. I'm probably more consistently working with good boundaries, but there's still times when I get that wrong. But nothing to the point where it's a fatal error that would, make the business implode. And there's always things to improve on our business. So, and the way that we show up. So yeah, I would keep it like that for now. Like, yes, there's been times when it's not going the way that I would like it to go. When I was on my own, I really felt like I was juggling too much. And the way I solved that was by looking at who I had around the tuition and who I had around Tutors Who Thrive. And it's like, who's really buying into this? Who are the people who are going to support me and grow this because they really want to be a part of it too. And it's been an amazing last 6 or 7 months with that in mind. But I'm still relatively new to it. And I don't know what it was like for you, Claire, when you first started growing a team. I've really noticed how much of a control freak I've become. And I find it really hard to let go of certain tasks. I'm having to really practice and be conscious that it's okay to ask for help.
Do you teach children as part of your business offering? Have you considered using resources from Classroom Secrets? At Classroom Secrets, we're always adding new resources for a range of subjects, and we're keen to hear your suggestions for resources too. We know that you didn't go into business to work more hours than you did in the classroom. You went into business to give you freedom. Let us help with that. Visit classroomsecrets.co.uk to sign up. It's great that you did that analysis and you actually realised, oh, I didn't do this thing and that's why I got these results, because sometimes we don't know what we're looking for or we don't realise, and then it gets worse, doesn't it? So I think, you've done the right thing, and it's normal, isn't it? You'll know this. It's normal for that to happen. In terms of taking team members on, I first did that in 2015, and I did that in the gap between having sort of the egg retrieval in IVF to the implantation, because I had to have them frozen because there were some medical issues. And in a way, what I did was go the other way. I didn't go down the control freak route. I went the opposite because I didn't want to be a control freak. What I'm trying to say is control freak is not good, but it's not bad also. What you need to try and do is be in the middle, which can be really, really hard. So I was at the other end of the spectrum where I was like, yeah, you do it in the best way you think. but that meant there were no SOPs, nobody put those in place. People could take a lot longer than you would expect on things, and that was difficult. And really, over time, we'd put the SOPs in place, but that kind of filtered down really into the culture, and the team grew really, really, really fast. And that was one of the things that we've been fixing really for the last couple of years. So being a control freak isn't as bad as you think it will be. The hardest thing for me was figuring out how to not control things, but also make sure you've got the best handle on things in the best way. And we found 90-day planning to be the best way to deal with that, actually. So that might be helpful. In terms of time management, it's a cycle. Even now, I am very practiced at it. So technically, I've been doing it nearly 10 years now, where I'm handing things over to the team and managing my own time. But I think the biggest lesson I've learned is it's always going to be a cycle. So you can think you want to get to this point where maybe you have less to do. One, it never happens. And two, if you got there, you'd be bored. So the hardest thing really is managing the cycle. So for example, I do not work in the school holidays if I can help it. And if I do, I work an early morning. As we're recording this, the school holidays are in 3.5 days for Easter, where the kids have got 2.5 weeks off. I have quite a lot to get done. So right now, I have been in lots of meetings about new products, new markets, and hiring a team member for the C-suite. So that is a lot of me. That's the things I do. Whereas in 4 weeks' time, I might have a whole week where I'm just trying to work on the podcast episodes that I'm producing. And that's why I like working asynchronously on the podcast as well, because it means I can fit it in when I have that time rather than it taking up meeting time and make me feel like I've got a freer week, because that can be quite difficult. When you talk about bringing team members on and juggling the two businesses, that is actually one of the reasons why I've brought Education Business Club into Classroom Secrets, because what I've realised after 10 years is that I've got to a point with Classroom Secrets where I am doing the board meetings and, bringing in C-suite members and doing all that kind of stuff. And I really do enjoy that. And it's not that I don't enjoy a startup, but you end up doing a lot of the legwork yourself. And I'm not averse to that. But when you think about the money that generates for the amount of time you're putting in, you get to the point where you know that that's probably not where your skill set lies anymore, and that you need help. And so bringing it into Classroom Secrets is my solution to that, to make sure that I'm only doing the podcast, really, the things that are important for me to do, and that everyone else can help with the other things. So it's one of those things where, and you'll know this yourself just from the 6-7 months you've been doing it, you can listen to all the books, you can listen to all the podcasts, and you'll get insights. But you've got to learn so much in the journey for yourself and know how it feels in order to be able to move forward on it. It's been really lovely to hear your insights today. What have we not talked about that we should have talked about today that would be really helpful for education business founders?
There's a lot there that I resonate with. The whole control freak, and then I suppose the laissez-faire approach is something which I've pondered a lot actually over. I first went into management when I was 19. I did a management training program at Matalan, which was meant to be graduate training program, but I managed to blag my way on. Had some really good feedback from the interview. I don't even know how I managed to get the interview, if I'm honest. But I noticed, and I thought it was an age thing, if I'm honest. I thought it was like, well, you're only 19, so my mindset was very much, nobody's going to listen to me, so you're going to have to approach delegating tasks in a very gentle way and be very human in your approach, which I am anyway. I think I do. I think I've always seen myself like that. And that's kind of how I went through. I didn't stay around in Matalan for long. I was there for just over a year, and then I went back to uni. And And then from then in, I went into sort of community work and didn't really have a leadership position as such, even though we led groups um, and people, but it wasn't exact. That wasn't a line manager to anybody. So I didn't really practice these skills for a long time. And it wasn't when I sort of went back into teaching or went towards teaching, sorry, when I was 30 that I that happened. You know, I started mentoring ECTs and had sort of more responsibilities across the school. And I noticed again, like that same feeling that I had when I was 19, like actually this wasn't an age thing, this was a personality thing. And I very much would say I was not controlling at all. However, like when I started my business, which was 6 years ago, I suppose then I wasn't really leading anybody but myself. I probably didn't recognize like that shift, that because this was mine, because it all relied on me, that I was taking control of it. And so, I don't know, something switched. And when somebody came, when I found my first tutor, and it wasn't, I suppose the tuition wasn't happening in a way that I wanted it to happen, or at a level that I've found acceptable, it caused conflict. And I struggled because I didn't know how to approach the conflict. I didn't know how to deal with the actual problem, because in my mind I was like, well, if you go down this humanistic route where you kind of just be gentle, I don't know whether humanistic's the right word really. I mean, we're not talking about horrible things, just somebody not performing in the way that you'd want them to perform, but trying to deal with it in a really gentle way where you kind of go, oh, can you just, I'd love it if I saw you do this, or you know, that isn't the way that I would do it. And all of these things kind of caused this conflict, because I was like, well, does it matter if that person's not delivering this thing in the same way that I would? They're doing it in the way that works for them. And as long as it's working for the children, then what does it matter? And so I had this like conflict between those things that rattled around. And actually there were bigger issues, and it wasn't being done at a high level. So something had to change. And it got to the point where I was like, oh my God, I need to grab this back and get control again. And actually what it did was slow me down. I think, like I said previously, that it just put me off for a while. So I kind of feel like I've flip-flopped from where I was at when I was 19, what it was like when I was a teacher, to now I'm like, oh no, I need to make sure that it's done to a particular level. And I think this is where you talk about SOPs and having standards in place, that maybe when you're onboarding, saying that these are the expectations, this is where you lean into your policies, this is where you lean into your job specs, and your recruitment process, because if you get those things right, then it's far more likely to succeed. One of my favorite books that I've read quite a few times, almost like a business journal, it's not really, it's an autobiography, is the Shoe Dog book. And in there, like the guy, I can't remember his name, the guy talks about like when he was creating Nike, he had some trusted friends who got on board relatively quickly. And there was one particular friend who he would almost abuse to a point, like, because he trusted him so much and he knew that he was quite resilient, this guy. And so he was the one that would often be given the real crappy jobs to do, like move house from East Coast to West Coast and then back again and up and down the country and, you know, in the US. But this guy was constantly looking for reassurance and praise, and he never the owner never gave it to him. I don't know why I can't remember his name, it completely escapes me. And he said that he knew that he wanted his praise, but he also knew that if he gave him the praise, he wouldn't then perform in the same way. And when I was reading, I was thinking, that's really unfair. Like that somebody's working really hard for you, they are part of the success of the business, and yet you can't even say well done. And as you sort of go through the journey, it comes back to this kind of person quite a bit. I understand, and this wouldn't be my approach, but I understand what he was doing. He was managing that person. And even though there was conflict there, he saw that purpose behind the way that he was treating them. And obviously this would not work for me and probably not for many others. But essentially it was just adapting how he was behaving for that person to get the most out of them. And I was thinking, wow, that's really brave, because I know that I would find that really tricky. So I think that what I've learned over the last few years is that, one, trust is really important. So in the early stages for an educational business, when you're finding that first person to come on board or the first team you're going to grow, who do you have in your current circle that you could reach out to just to see if this is a possibility? Now, I've experienced this myself over the last couple of years where I went back out and I've reached out to people I knew and trusted and said, look, I've got this opportunity. I'd love to have you involved. Is there a way we can make it work? And in my case, and I know it will be different for you, Claire, with Classroom Secrets, or to a point maybe, where I say, I've got like 3 or 4 hours a week that I'd like you to work, or I've got 2 or 3 evenings where I'd like you to work. Is this something we can make work? Well, I suppose an educational business perspective, like Classroom Secrets or anything similar, it could be that you've got a 16-hour contract ready to go, or you got 20 hours that you would like to fill. I mean, you're talking about filling C-suites up, which isn't going to be cheap. So therefore, like, your involvement needs to be high level because you want to make sure that recruitment process follows the right steps. You find the right person. But I just think that trust is absolutely critical. And it's so easy to lose that trust when you see that thing that's not being done quite right. I still think like the trust is important, but I still come back to that bravery as a leader and going, actually, if you see something you don't like, or you see something that you know needs changing, it's just being brave and having that awkward conversation and just saying, do you know what? I saw this. I would prefer it if you did this. Or you could even, I mean, look, even that, I'm still trying to sweeten the deal. Look, I didn't like what I saw there. Actually, this way is going to be better. I'd like you to do that next time. You know, bringing that to the table and creating safe spaces where you can have those conversations and people will respect what you say. If I was going back and talking to my 19-year-old self now, I'd probably say, "What, we didn't really change that much. You are more controlling now, probably, but you're still the same person within. You still have the same desire to make sure that you're not being too demanding, but at the same time, you still want something good to happen. You still want people to work at a high level, but the way that you communicate is safe and secure." Because that wasn't something that I experienced during that time. It was quite volatile. Retail can be so volatile, and I'm sure those people who have experienced it will resonate. In terms of things we haven't spoken about, I tend to specialize in the startup. So when you're talking there around like that time and energy, and then I suppose value and income comes into it, like where are your skill based or where are your skills based? I kind of see myself in that startup space, like in terms of the support I give to others, like, because I really relish that. I love that chase. And I do wonder if that is part of almost like that being addicted to the chase part where you go, oh, do you know what? Start from nothing and get to, I don't know, 50K, start from nothing and grow an audience, start from nothing and become an established person in a particular space. I really relish that. However, we understand that life doesn't stay still and things change. And we need to change with it. And part of that, I think you're absolutely right, is recognizing how your skill set has developed over time. Like, you are a decade into it, more than a decade into your business. So it makes sense that your skills now live in a different stratosphere to when you first started. And I think this is the same for all of us. So I think it's very easy to get addicted to that chase. It's almost like that Del Boy mentality. Like, once you've kind of found that element of success, it's almost like trying to chase that feeling again that you had in the startup and not recognizing that actually we can just adjust where we're aiming and still get that same feeling, but then be aiming for a new, whether it's money driven or just generally business driven or time driven, whatever it may be, but chase the next thing. And if you still get that feeling, you still get that rush, but you're utilizing the skills that you've developed over a period of time. So yeah, that's kind of where I think maybe the thing we haven't spoken about yet, and just bringing that together for people who are listening, who are at different stages of their business. It's been fascinating chatting about these things because we don't get a chance to reflect. And also the things that we carry around with us as well, like just from our personal life, which has affected like us along the way. You know, we often within these podcasts talk very much like business, but don't bring our personal stuff in. So I appreciate you sharing that IVF journey, because that's not easy. It's not easy, particularly when you're doing what you're doing, when you don't have the security of a job around you who will make sure you're okay, protect your income, but make it like as stress-free as possible, which is exactly what you need. So yeah, I appreciate that. And I think many people will appreciate that too. But thank you, Claire. I really appreciate this. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I reckon we could continue this conversation for at least another 2 hours. You said so much there that, oh gosh, I just want to delve into, but I'll be quick and we'll close it off because people have lives and businesses to run, of course. But that bit you said about employing people that you know, or giving people that you know a few hours here and there, it was exactly the same for me at Classroom Secrets. Yes, all right, it's different now. But in the beginning, that's exactly what it was. It was giving people a small amount of hours. The first person I technically employed was my sister. And then along the way, it was my mum as well, other people that I knew. They weren't the only people. I learned things through that process because you talked about trust. It's a trust in a different way. And then I think as the business grows and you learn all of the lessons, you learn sort of the different types of trust, really. One is trusting in what you already know, and one is trusting somebody to be able to do a job that maybe you don't have the skills in, or you haven't set out in the first place of exactly how that should be. But yeah, it was the same. People that I knew, small numbers of hours. In terms of the bravery to lead people in the way that they need leading, that has been a huge learning for me. I am still not somebody who leads forcefully, but I have learned to have those difficult conversations. Absolutely. And learned to present the right circumstances and opportunities to take something down a certain path, whether that be that it helps people realise what's right for them, or whether that's dealing with something that other people aren't willing to deal with. And you brought up this phrase, can you just? And honestly, as soon as I heard that, I was like, yes, can you just? It starts with, could you just do this? I hope you don't mind. Have you got time? And it evolves over time, and you realise more the words you should take out, like just, for example, because it really does devalue the work that you're asking somebody to do, not only in your eyes, but in their eyes as well. So it's something that you don't switch on overnight, but I think as time goes on, you become more intentional, and it's not necessarily about being harder. It's just about being willing, as you say, to have those difficult conversations and not accepting it. From my perspective now, what I find is that I've been through that journey, and now I have to help my leaders go through the same journey, because we all, well, not everybody, but lots of people have this, where they're thinking about all of the aspects and they think that they're doing the right thing by doing X, Y, and Z. But actually, that's not helping them. It's not helping the other person. It's not helping the business, and helping them to change of perspective, I would say. Change of perspective on what is the right thing to happen in that circumstance. And in terms of having a startup, and I would say there was a time where I really did love the thrill of having a startup. I've just realised over the last few years, I love Classroom Secrets more and what that gives me now. And I probably went into the startup because I was frustrated in the way things were at Classroom Secrets and the team that I had. But I still had to go on that journey to figure it out. I still had to start up another business to realise, actually, I have all these skills now and I want to do things differently. And also learn from having different people in the business as well, and different mentors throughout that journey to get to that point. But I think having the right team members in place for the particular time in your business, because we can all say that, we can say, oh, well, get the right team members in place. And that does shift blame quite a lot, to be honest. But as you grow your business, if you listen to any business book about growth, they'll tell you that the team who started the business is not the team who's going to finish the business. And so as a business grows and matures and develops, you need different people. And so a lot of it, I think, is in finding the right team members and learning how to do that, and being able to assess more quickly when you haven't made the right choice and actually be able to deal with that as well. But yeah, I think we should definitely reflect more, shouldn't we, and give ourselves credit for the lessons that we've learned and the experiences that we have. But also, I feel like I came to that point more so by thinking about how I wanted my life to be rather than what value I could get paid for. I'm not saying that we shouldn't think about the value we can bring. We should. But it should start with the kind of life we want to lead. And I could absolutely do mentoring sessions full-time every day. I could bring value that way, but I don't want to. And admitting that to yourself and being okay with it. I think I've gone through a period of time where I've thought, well, I have this gift and I'm not using it effectively, and feeling guilty for that. I feel similar with singing, actually, because I can sing, but I don't sing. Why am I not sharing that? And so that's something I'm still working on as well. I think we can get trapped in that. So thinking about the life you want to live rather than the value that's possible for you to deliver in exchange for money, I think is a helpful thing. But Richard, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and thank you for the support that you're giving everyone in your lessons too. Thank you for listening to the Education Business Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets. To find more resources to grow your business, visit classroomsecrets.co.uk.